You are trapped in an electromagnetic field that you yourself fed this morning. If your mind keeps returning to that mistake, that person, or that trauma, it is not a lack of willpower. It is pure physics. Right now, as you sit here, your brain can pull you out of this moment and drop you into a scene that no longer exists. Your body reacts as if it is real. Your heart shifts, your muscles tense, and without noticing, you begin shaping your day around something that is already over. Why does your brain ignore the present, to live in a past that no longer exists, and how is this collapsing your physical reality right now? This is not about motivation. It is about patterns, chemistry, and attention. And once you see how the loop works, you will understand that the door out of it has been there the whole time. Your mind does not keep going back to that moment because it enjoys hurting you. It goes back because your body learned something there. It learned a chemical pattern, and now it craves it. Every time you relive that mistake, that argument, that humiliation, your brain releases a familiar mix of stress hormones. Cortisol, adrenaline, sometimes even a strange touch of dopamine that comes from anticipation or emotional intensity. It feels terrible, yes, but it also feels known, and the body prefers a painful certainty over an unfamiliar peace. Have you noticed how the memory often arrives with a physical sensation first? A tight chest, a drop in the stomach, a subtle heat in the face. It is rarely just a thought. It is a full-body event. That is because your nervous system does not separate past from present. When you remember, it reacts as if the event is happening now. Imagine drinking a strong cup of coffee every morning for years. One day you skip it. Your body protests, headache, irritability, fatigue. The craving is not about pleasure anymore. It is about regulation. The same mechanism can attach itself to stress. If you have been revisiting the same emotional scene for weeks, months, or even decades, your body has adjusted to that hormonal baseline. So when things are calm, when nothing dramatic is happening, your system feels unfamiliar silence, and silence can feel unsafe. This is why you sometimes sabotage peaceful moments. You wake up on a quiet Sunday, and without warning, your mind pulls up that old conversation. The one where you should have said something different. The one where you were misunderstood. Within seconds, your heart rate shifts, your muscles tense, your breathing changes. The body says, "Ah, there it is, the usual signal." It is not weakness, it is conditioning. Your brain is designed to automate what repeats. If you replay a memory often enough, the neural pathway becomes smoother, faster, more efficient, like walking the same trail through a forest every day. At first, you push through branches. After a while, there is a visible path. Eventually, it becomes the default route. And here is the subtle danger. The body begins to anticipate the chemical surge. It expects the stress response, so it scans for triggers that justify it. A neutral comment from someone becomes criticism. A small delay becomes rejection. A simple mistake becomes proof of failure. The mind finds a story that allows the body to release what it has grown used to. Have you ever felt a sudden wave of anxiety and then searched for a reason? That search is not logical, it is biochemical. The body feels something and the mind rushes to explain it. So it returns to the familiar archive of pain. This is where many people judge themselves. Why can't I just let this go? But the question is incomplete. It assumes that the loop is purely psychological. In reality, it is physiological. You are not only dealing with thoughts, you are dealing with a body that has been trained to live in a certain chemical climate. If you pay close attention, you will see the sequence. The image appears. The body reacts. The reaction intensifies the image. The image justifies the reaction. It becomes a closed circuit. Thought feeds chemistry. Chemistry feeds thought. And the more intense the memory was originally, the stronger the imprint. High emotional charge equals high biological imprint. That is why dramatic experiences tend to replay more than neutral ones. The nervous system tagged them as important for survival, but survival does not always mean safety. Sometimes it simply means familiarity. There is another layer here that is uncomfortable to admit. Stress can make you feel alive. When adrenaline rises, perception sharpens, time slows down, the world feels intense. After years of operating in that intensity, calm can feel empty. So the mind unconsciously returns to what produces that sharpness. You may believe you are trying to solve the past. In truth, your body may be asking for the sensation the past provides. This does not mean you are broken. It means your system is adaptable. And what is learned can be relearned. But first you have to see the mechanism without shame. When the memory surfaces, instead of immediately diving into the story, notice the body, notice the breath, notice the temperature of your skin, notice the contraction. You are witnessing a chemical wave, and like any wave, it rises and falls if it is not constantly reinforced. The problem is not that the thought appears. The problem is that you immediately identify with it and fuel it. The body releases cortisol, you interpret it as danger, and you add more images, more dialogue, more intensity. The dose increases. Over time, this becomes a subtle addiction to emotional familiarity. Not because you want pain, but because your system confuses intensity with normality. And once you understand that your recurring thought is not just a narrative but a chemical habit, something shifts. You stop arguing with the content and start observing the pattern. You begin to see that forcing positive thinking on top of this biological storm will not work. Because if your body is flooded with stress hormones, repeating optimistic phrases is like trying to paint over rust without cleaning the metal underneath. There is a conflict forming beneath the surface, a gap between what you are telling yourself and what your biology is signaling. And that gap is where many people unknowingly create even more tension. There is a moment when you stand in front of the mirror, repeat a hopeful sentence about your future, and yet something inside you tightens instead of relaxes. You say the words about abundance, love, success, but your stomach feels heavy. Your chest feels guarded. And when you walk away, nothing truly shifted. This is where many people silently give up. They conclude that positive visualization does not work, or worse, that they are incapable of change. But the real problem is not visualization itself. It is the conflict between the image in your mind and the chemistry in your body. If your nervous system is still calibrated to stress, fear, or lack, and you attempt to paste a bright mental picture on top of that internal state, your system detects inconsistency. The brain is designed to look for coherence. When your thoughts say, "I am thriving," but your body is flooded with signals of threat, the brain trusts the body. Biology always speaks louder than intention. Imagine trying to install advanced software on a computer with damaged hardware. The screen may light up for a second, but the system cannot sustain the program. In the same way, repeating affirmations while your body remains in survival mode creates friction instead of alignment. You may have experienced this. You visualize financial freedom, yet feel a subtle contraction in your gut. You imagine a healthy relationship, yet your shoulders remain tense. The mind projects expansion, but the body whispers danger. That internal disagreement drains energy. Over time, this dissonance can make you feel fraudulent. You start to think, maybe I don't believe it enough. So you push harder. You repeat more affirmations. You force brighter images. But force increases resistance. The gap widens. Here is what is rarely explained. Visualization is not just about mental pictures. It is about state. The brain and the body must begin to move in the same direction. If your internal chemistry contradicts your imagined future, your system experiences it as a lie. And the brain does not reward lies with results. It protects you from them. When you vividly imagine something positive, the brain can activate neural networks similar to real experience. That part is true, but if, at the same time, stress hormones dominate your bloodstream, the signal becomes mixed. It is like broadcasting two radio frequencies at once. The stronger one wins. If fear has been rehearsed for years, it has a stronger signal. This is why some people feel worse after motivational exercises. They leave inspired for a few hours, but then reality feels even heavier. The contrast between the imagined life and their current emotional baseline becomes sharper. Instead of creating movement, it amplifies frustration. The mistake is not dreaming big. The mistake is ignoring the body while doing it. Before the mind can hold a new future steadily, the nervous system must feel safe enough to accept it. Safety is the foundation of expansion. Without it, every positive image triggers subtle doubt. And doubt generates more stress chemistry, and that stress reinforces the old pattern. You see how the loop continues. There is also another hidden effect. When you visualize something you deeply want, but do not internally believe is possible, the brain registers the difference between current identity and imagined identity. That gap can activate self-protection. It whispers, "Stay where you are. This is familiar." So instead of attracting what you desire, you unconsciously defend the old self. This does not mean you should stop imagining a better future. It means the order matters. First regulate, then visualize. First bring the body into a calmer state. Then introduce the new image gently, not as a demand but as a possibility. When the body begins to feel even slightly more open, slightly more grounded, the same visualization lands differently. It no longer clashes with your internal chemistry. It begins to harmonize with it. Think of it like tuning an instrument. If the strings are tight and unstable, playing a beautiful melody will sound distorted. But when the tension is adjusted, even simple notes resonate clearly. Your nervous system is that instrument. Many people try to jump directly to joy without addressing the stress addiction underneath. They attempt to leap from survival to abundance in one mental step. But the body moves in gradients, not in slogans. If you notice resistance while visualizing, do not attack it. Notice it. Where do you feel it? Is it in your throat, your jaw, your stomach? That sensation is more honest than the words you are repeating. Work with that first, because if your internal state remains unchanged, every future you imagine will be filtered through the same electromagnetic signature you are already broadcasting. And this is where the conversation deepens. If your thoughts and feelings generate measurable signals in the body, then what exactly are you emitting when you revisit the past or force a future you do not yet embody? What kind of frequency are you stabilizing day after day without realizing it? Every thought you repeat is not just a sentence in your head, it is an electrical event. Neurons fire, networks activate, signals travel, and every electrical activity in your body produces a magnetic field. This is not mysticism. It is basic physics. Your heart generates an electromagnetic field. Your brain does too. These fields change depending on your emotional state. When you feel fear, the rhythm shifts. When you feel appreciation, the pattern shifts again. Your inner world is not silent. It is measurable. Now consider what happens when you return to the same memory again and again. The same neural circuits fire, the same chemistry releases, the same heart rhythm patterns repeat. You are not just remembering the past. You are recreating a physiological state in the present. That state has a signature. Imagine tuning a radio. If you set it to one frequency, you will hear one type of music. If you keep it there, that is all you will receive. The device is not judging the station. It is simply aligned with a signal. When your mind keeps replaying a painful memory, you are tuning your internal system to a specific emotional frequency. And when that frequency stabilizes, your perception begins to filter reality through it. If you are broadcasting resentment, you will notice more evidence of disrespect. If you are broadcasting loss, you will notice more absence. The world may not have changed, but your selective attention has. Your brain's reticular activating system scans the environment to confirm the emotional pattern you are rehearsing. This is where the concept becomes practical. The electromagnetic signature of your past is not floating in the air as some mystical cloud. It is embedded in your nervous system. It is the rhythm your body has memorized. When you wake up and immediately think about that unresolved situation, your heart rate subtly shifts, your breathing tightens, your posture adjusts. Even before you speak to anyone, your system is broadcasting tension. People respond to that tension, often unconsciously. Their tone changes, their body language reacts, and you interpret their reaction as proof that something is wrong. The loop strengthens. You might say, "But I'm not doing anything, I'm just thinking." Yet thinking is doing. It is biological action. Electrical impulses are firing, hormones are moving, muscles are preparing. Over time, this repeated pattern becomes your baseline frequency. It becomes familiar, stable, predictable. And once a pattern stabilizes, it begins to shape your decisions. You hesitate in moments that require courage. You overreact in moments that require patience. You withdraw when openness would create connection, not because you lack intelligence, but because your internal signal is set to a channel that anticipates threat or disappointment. There is also something deeper happening. When you consistently return to the same emotional memory, your brain strengthens the neural pathways associated with it. That pathway becomes the fastest route. Like water carving a groove into rock over years, repetition creates depth. The deeper the groove, the easier the water flows through it again. This is why certain memories feel automatic. They arise without invitation. They carry emotional weight instantly. Your system has practiced them. If someone says a word that resembles the past event, your body reacts before your conscious mind can intervene. The electromagnetic pattern activates. The old signature pulses through you, and in that moment it feels real, immediate, present. But here is the crucial insight. The memory itself is not emitting anything into your environment. Your current reactivation of it is. The past event is over. What continues is your present rehearsal. This is empowering, even if uncomfortable, because if repetition strengthens the signal, different repetition can weaken it. The brain remains plastic. The heart rhythm can shift. The nervous system can learn a new baseline. However, before change happens, you must recognize that you are not a passive victim of random thoughts. You are stabilizing certain frequencies through repetition. Every time you revisit the same emotional story, you reinforce its electrical pattern, and your body does not distinguish between an external threat and an internally generated one. The signal is the signal. If you spend years broadcasting stress, your system adapts to it. Muscles remain slightly tense. Sleep becomes lighter. Digestion shifts. Small things trigger larger reactions. It is not dramatic all at once. It is gradual, cumulative. And the more your internal field stabilizes around a certain emotional tone, the more your brain predicts that tone in the future. It becomes expectation, and expectation subtly shapes behavior. You begin to see how this connects to something even more precise happening inside your brain. If repeated thought produces repeated electrical and chemical patterns, and those patterns reinforce neural pathways, then each return to the past is not neutral. It is structural. It is rewiring. Which raises a sharper question. If the brain cannot fully distinguish between what is vividly imagined and what is physically happening, what are you doing to your own cells each time you replay that memory? Your brain is not a historian. It is a simulator. When you remember something vividly, the brain does not simply look at the memory. It reconstructs it. It activates many of the same neural networks that were active during the original experience. The images, the sounds, the emotional tone, they are rebuilt in real time, and your body responds to that reconstruction as if it is happening now. This is where the loop becomes dangerous. Imagine recalling a painful argument. You see the person's face. You hear their voice. Instantly, your heart rate shifts. Your jaw tightens. Your breathing becomes shallow. Stress hormones begin to circulate. Your body prepares for conflict even though you are alone in a quiet room. For your nervous system, there is no clear line between memory and event. There is only activation. Now here is the loop. The memory triggers a bodily reaction. That bodily reaction intensifies the emotional charge of the memory. The stronger the emotion, the more vividly the brain encodes the experience again. And the next time you remember it, the pathway is even stronger. Thought activates chemistry. Chemistry amplifies thought, and the cycle feeds itself. Over time, this loop becomes automatic. The memory appears, and before you consciously decide anything, your body is already reacting. Then your body's reaction convinces your mind that the threat is real. If my heart is racing, this must be serious. So you add more details to the story. You replay it from different angles. You imagine what you should have said. The loop deepens. This is not weakness. It is neurobiology. Neurons that fire together, wire together. The more frequently a specific network activates, the more efficient it becomes. The brain conserves energy by strengthening repeated patterns. If you rehearse a painful memory often enough, the neural pathway becomes a highway. Fast, direct, easy to access. And because the body reacts every time, your cells are repeatedly exposed to the same stress chemistry. It is like pressing the same alarm button day after day. Even if there is no fire, the system does not know that. It only knows that the alarm keeps sounding. Have you noticed how some memories feel more intense now than they did years ago? That is often because you have rehearsed them more times than the original event lasted. A 5-minute argument can become a 1,000-hour internal replay. The repeated activation strengthens the emotional imprint. There is also something subtle happening with identity. Each time you revisit the memory, you reinforce the role you played in it, the one who was rejected, the one who failed, the one who was betrayed. The brain links that narrative to your sense of self, and once it becomes part of identity, it defends it. So even when evidence appears that contradicts the old story, the brain filters it out. It prefers consistency. The loop is not just chemical and electrical, it becomes psychological. At this point, many people try to fight the thought directly. They say, "Stop thinking about it." But suppression activates more monitoring. The brain checks whether the thought is gone, which requires thinking about it again. The loop tightens. The key shift is not force. It is awareness. When the memory surfaces, instead of diving into the storyline, shift attention to the body. Notice the exact physical response. Is your throat constricted? Are your shoulders rising? Is your stomach tightening? By observing the bodily reaction without adding more narrative, you interrupt the amplification phase. The memory may still appear, but the chemical surge does not escalate in the same way. There is a small window between activation and identification. In that brief space, you can choose not to add fuel. You cannot always stop the first spark, but you can decide whether to build a fire around it. If you allow the physical sensation to rise and fall without attaching new thoughts to it, the nervous system learns something new. It learns that activation does not always require escalation. Over time, the pathway weakens, not instantly, but gradually. The brain is plastic. It reorganizes based on use. If the old loop is not reinforced with the same intensity, its grip loosens. The highway becomes a side road. And yet, there is another layer to understand. If observation alone can begin to shift neural wiring, what does that imply about the role of attention itself? If simply focusing on a thought strengthens it, and observing it differently weakens it, then attention is not neutral. It is participatory. Which leads to a deeper question. If your focus can reinforce a neural loop inside your brain, could it also be fixing certain patterns in your external reality by the same principle of observation? In physics, there is a strange principle. The act of observing can influence the outcome of an experiment. At the quantum level, particles behave like possibilities until they are measured. Once measured, they appear fixed. Whether you go deep into the science or not, the metaphor is powerful. Attention is not passive, it participates. Now bring this closer to your daily life. When you repeatedly focus on a specific problem, the debt, the betrayal, the mistake, your attention narrows around it. You analyze it, you replay it, you anticipate its consequences. In doing so, you are not just noticing it, you are stabilizing it in your mental field. Your brain treats what you consistently observe as important. It allocates more neural resources to it. It strengthens the circuits connected to it. Over time, the problem becomes more defined, more detailed, more solid in your perception. This is what reality fixation looks like. It does not mean you magically create events out of thin air. It means that among the countless variables in your life, you repeatedly lock onto the same pattern. And what you lock onto becomes dominant in your experience. Imagine walking into a crowded room after deciding that people dislike you. Your attention will scan for micro-signals, a neutral expression, a delayed greeting, a distracted glance. Each of these becomes evidence. Meanwhile, the smiles, the warmth, the neutral interactions fade into the background. You observed rejection, so rejection became your reality. Your gaze froze one possibility and ignored others. This is similar to what happens in the lab. Before measurement, there are multiple potential states. After measurement, one outcome is recorded. In your psychological world, before interpretation, there are multiple meanings available. After you focus intensely on one interpretation, it hardens. When you keep returning to the same painful memory, you are repeatedly measuring it from the same angle. You are not allowing it to dissolve into alternative meanings. You are freezing it in its most charged form. Over time, that fixed interpretation shapes your expectations, and expectations influence behavior. You speak with more defensiveness. You hesitate in moments that require trust. You over-prepare for failure. Others respond to that energy. Their response confirms your expectation. The cycle looks external, but it is rooted in attention. There is also something deeper happening inside the brain. Attention strengthens neural firing. What you focus on repeatedly becomes more accessible. The brain's filtering system begins prioritizing similar stimuli in the environment. So if you are focused on lack, you notice expenses more than opportunities. If you are focused on disrespect, you notice tone more than intention. You might believe you are being realistic, but realism is often filtered attention. This is not about blaming yourself for every difficulty. Life contains genuine challenges. The key insight is that your sustained observation can either keep a problem rigid or allow space for alternative pathways to emerge. When you stare at a single narrative, this will never change. Your mind stops searching creatively. The brain loves efficiency. If the outcome is already decided, it conserves energy. It does not explore new strategies. Your observation has fixed the result before action even begins. Think of it like holding a camera. If you zoom in tightly on a crack in the wall, that crack fills the frame. It looks massive. Step back, and you see the entire structure. Step further back, and the crack is a small detail in a larger space. The wall did not change, your frame did. Attention defines scale. Now ask yourself, what are you consistently zooming into? Where does your gaze linger every day? What internal image do you revisit with intensity? That focus is not neutral. It is shaping which possibilities remain visible to you. This is why shifting attention is not denial. It is redirection of energy. When you widen your focus, when you consciously look for alternative interpretations, you loosen the fixation. You allow multiple potential outcomes to exist again in your awareness. But here is the tension. If you have been fixating on a problem for years, that fixation feels like control. Letting go of it feels risky. If you stop monitoring the debt, will it get worse? If you stop replaying the betrayal, will you be hurt again? The mind believes that constant observation equals protection, and yet constant fixation often produces the opposite. It drains creativity, it narrows perception, it locks identity around struggle. The real shift is not ignoring reality, it is observing your observation. It is noticing where your attention habitually freezes one version of events and asking whether that version is the only one available. Because if attention can solidify a problem, it can also open space around it. And that space is where new decisions are born. But if the fixation continues unchecked, the pattern does not remain contained in thought. It begins to project forward, quietly shaping what you expect tomorrow to look like. There is a quiet cost to letting your mind run the same painful script every day. It does not always explode in dramatic ways. It erodes, slowly, almost politely. Until one day you look back and realize that years passed, but the emotional landscape barely changed. Mental collapse rarely looks like a breakdown. It looks like repetition. When the same thought patterns loop long enough, they begin to define what feels possible. You stop questioning them. They become the background noise of your life. This is just how things are. This is just who I am. Those sentences do not feel dramatic. They feel realistic. But realism, when shaped by repetition, can quietly shrink your future. If you wake up each morning and your first thoughts return to the same regret or resentment, you are setting the tone for your nervous system before the day even begins. Your body calibrates to that emotional climate. Decisions made from that state tend to reinforce it. You speak a little more cautiously. You avoid a little more risk. You expect a little less from people. Over months and years, those small adjustments compound. The true price is not just sadness, it is predictability. When your internal patterns do not change, your external outcomes often follow familiar lines. Not because the universe is punishing you, but because your perception, reactions, and choices are moving within a narrow range. Think about it carefully. If you constantly expect disappointment, you may not fully invest in opportunities. If you assume relationships will fail, you might keep emotional distance. If you believe financial struggle is inevitable, you may not pursue strategies that require confidence and patience. Each of these choices feels justified in the moment, but together, they construct a future that mirrors the past. And that is the real risk. It is possible to live 10 years while internally repeating the same unresolved day. The scenery changes, the calendar changes, but the emotional script remains the same. The body continues releasing similar stress chemistry. The brain continues activating the same networks. Identity hardens around the same story. This is how destiny becomes mechanical. There is also a biological cost. Chronic activation of stress responses wears down the system. Sleep becomes less restorative. Inflammation increases, focus decreases. You feel older not just because of time, but because your nervous system has been running in survival mode for too long. When the mind collapses into repetition, creativity declines. The brain prefers efficiency, so it stops exploring new interpretations. You stop asking what else is possible. Instead, you unconsciously ask, how will this go wrong again? The question itself limits the answers available to you. And here is the subtle tragedy. Most people do not notice this happening. There is no alarm that announces you are about to relive the same emotional pattern for the next decade. It feels normal, familiar, even responsible. You tell yourself you are being cautious, realistic, prepared. But preparation rooted in fear often prevents transformation. The longer the loop continues, the more the brain projects it forward. If something painful happened once, the mind assumes it will happen again. If a business failed, future risks feel heavier. If a relationship ended badly, future intimacy feels dangerous. The past becomes a template for prediction. Prediction shapes behavior. Behavior shapes outcomes. Outcomes reinforce prediction. That is how a temporary experience becomes a long-term identity. This is not about blaming yourself for caution. It is about recognizing that unexamined repetition has a cost. The cost is flexibility. The cost is possibility. The cost is the version of you that never had a chance to emerge because the old script kept running. You may think the danger is feeling bad, but the deeper danger is stagnation. It is waking up years from now and realizing that your inner world never updated even though your life kept moving. The mind, when unchecked, prefers the known discomfort over the unknown opportunity. It believes repetition equals safety, but safety without growth becomes confinement. And yet, this is not a sentence. It is a warning light. The fact that you can observe the loop means it is not absolute. The moment you see that your thoughts are projecting the past into the future, you step slightly outside the pattern. That small distance matters, because if repetition creates a predictable destiny, interruption creates a crack in that predictability. Even a brief pause between thought and reaction begins to loosen the machinery. And within that pause, there is a narrow window where the pattern has not fully solidified into emotion and action. That window is shorter than you think, but it is there. There is a brief space between a thought appearing and your body fully reacting to it. Most people never notice it. The memory surfaces, and within seconds the chest tightens, the jaw locks, the story expands. It feels instantaneous, but it is not. There is a small window where the thought is still just a spark. In that narrow gap, before the chemistry floods your system, you have more influence than you think. Not control over whether the thought appears, but influence over whether it becomes a full emotional storm. When the old memory arises, your instinct is either to fight it or to dive into it. Both reactions feed it. Fighting creates tension. Diving in strengthens the narrative. The alternative is simpler and more difficult at the same time. Observe it. Not the content. Not the details of who said what. Observe the fact that a thought has appeared. Silently name it. There is the memory. Not, this is happening again. Just, there it is. Then shift attention to the body. Where is the first signal? The throat, the stomach, the shoulders. Stay with the physical sensation as if you were a scientist watching a reaction in a lab. You are not trying to stop it. You are watching it unfold. Something interesting happens when you do this. The identity begins to separate from the experience. Instead of "I am anxious," it becomes "anxiety is moving through the body." That subtle change reduces fusion. You are no longer fully inside the character of the past. You are the observer of it. This separation is the switch. When you observe without adding commentary, the chemical wave often peaks and begins to decline within about 90 seconds. The nervous system is built to discharge activation if it is not constantly re-stimulated by new thoughts. But if you add fuel, replaying dialogue, imagining revenge, predicting future failure, the wave renews itself. Try this in real time. The next time the thought appears, do not argue with it. Do not justify it, do not suppress it. Watch it like a passing image on a screen. Notice how it tries to pull you into the storyline. Notice the urge to explain or defend. Stay with the sensation instead. At first, it may feel uncomfortable. You are interrupting a habit. The brain expects the usual sequence: thought, emotion, elaboration. When you withhold elaboration, there is a brief sense of incompleteness, almost like leaving a sentence unfinished. But if you stay present, the body begins to regulate. Breathing slows slightly, muscles soften by degrees, the intensity loses volume. You are teaching your system that activation does not require escalation. This is not about pretending the past did not matter. It is about breaking the automatic chain reaction. You are allowing the thought to exist without granting it full authority over your physiology. And here is the deeper shift. When you consistently observe instead of react, the brain starts forming new associations. The memory no longer equals immediate stress surge. It equals awareness. Over time, the neural pathway weakens because it is not reinforced with the same emotional charge. You may notice something surprising. The memory might begin to feel less vivid, less urgent, not erased, just quieter. That is because emotion is what gives memory gravity. Without strong emotional fuel, thoughts lose their pull. This technique works precisely because it does not rely on force. You are not trying to replace the thought with a positive one. You are not battling it. You are stepping slightly to the side and watching. In that space, you reclaim energy. Imagine how much attention you have spent revisiting the same mental scene. Each replay consumed focus, breath, muscle tension. When you interrupt the loop, that energy becomes available again. It does not disappear. It returns to you. At first, this window of awareness may last only a few seconds before you get pulled back into the story. That is normal. The goal is not perfection, it is repetition. Each time you notice the loop earlier, the switch activates sooner. Gradually, the gap widens. The thought appears, and instead of immediate identification, there is recognition. Recognition creates choice. Choice alters pattern. But as this space expands, another realization often follows. If you are able to observe the memory as a construction happening now, then what exactly are you observing? Is it the fixed past, or is it something being rebuilt in the present moment? And if it is being rebuilt, what does that say about the solidity of the story you have been returning to all these years? What if the memory you keep returning to is not a fixed recording, but a reconstruction happening in real time? Most people imagine memory as a file stored somewhere in the brain, as if there is a cabinet inside your head, and when you open a drawer, the event plays exactly as it happened. But neuroscience tells a different story. Each time you remember something, you rebuild it. You assemble pieces of sensory data, emotion, interpretation, and current mood into a new version of the past. You are not retrieving a photograph, you are repainting a scene. This means that the version of the argument you replay today is influenced by who you are today. Your current beliefs, your current insecurities, your current emotional state all color the reconstruction. If you feel rejected now, the memory may emphasize moments that confirm rejection. If you feel angry, the same event may highlight injustice. The past becomes flexible data shaped by present perception. This is uncomfortable because it challenges the certainty of your story. It suggests that what you are fighting may not be the original event, but a version of it that has evolved through repetition. Every time you revisit it with strong emotion, you reinforce certain details and weaken others. The brain updates the memory during recall. It edits. So when you say, "This is exactly what happened," it is more accurate to say, "This is how I am reconstructing it now." Think about someone you have not seen in 20 years. If you try to picture their face, the image may be blurry. You fill in gaps. You adjust features without realizing it. The mind dislikes incompleteness, so it completes the picture. Memory works in a similar way. It fills missing pieces with assumptions that feel true. Now consider what happens when emotion is added. Strong emotion acts like a highlighter. It makes certain fragments glow brighter. The tone of voice, the expression, the single sentence that hurt. Meanwhile, neutral details fade. The brain prioritizes what feels significant for survival. Over time, the memory can become more dramatic than the original event. Not because you are lying to yourself, but because your nervous system has rehearsed the most charged elements repeatedly. The story gains intensity through repetition. Here is the deeper insight. The person who hurt you years ago no longer exists in that exact form. They have changed. You have changed. The circumstances have changed. But when you replay the memory, you animate a version of them frozen in time. You dress that character with today's emotional tone. You give them a voice shaped by your current state. You are interacting with a projection built from stored data and present interpretation. This does not invalidate your pain. The event mattered, the feelings were real, but the solidity of the story may not be as fixed as it feels. If memory is reconstructed, then it is also modifiable, not by denial but by perspective. When you observe a memory calmly without adding fresh emotional charge, you begin to notice its fluidity. Details shift, the intensity softens, you might even recognize aspects you overlooked before. Perhaps you were also afraid. Perhaps the other person was reacting from their own limitations. New layers become visible when the emotional filter loosens. It is like adjusting the lighting in a room. Under harsh light, shadows look sharp and dramatic. Under softer light, the same shapes appear different. The furniture has not moved, the illumination changed. If your past is data that gets reorganized each time you access it, then each revisit is an opportunity. You can either reinforce the old emotional pattern or allow a slightly different interpretation to emerge. Even small shifts matter. A degree less anger, a degree more understanding, a degree more neutrality. The more neutral the reconstruction becomes, the less chemical charge it carries. And without heavy emotion, the memory loses some of its gravitational pull. It becomes information rather than identity. This is where many people resist. They fear that softening the story means excusing what happened. It does not. It means freeing yourself from being bound to a single version of it. If you have been returning to the same scene for years, ask yourself, is this the event as it was? Or is this the event as my nervous system has shaped it over time? That question alone creates space. And in that space, the image begins to lose density. It is no longer a solid block of pain. It becomes a mental construction you can observe. Once you see that the past is being rebuilt in the present, another possibility opens. If emotion gives the memory weight, and weight keeps it anchored in your system, what would happen if you deliberately change the emotional charge attached to the image? A problem feels solid because it carries emotional weight. It feels heavy, dense, almost physical. You can sense it in your chest or in your stomach. You think about it, and your body reacts immediately. That reaction gives the thought substance. It makes it feel real and immovable. But what gives it that weight is not the image itself. It is the charge attached to it. If you picture a simple object in your mind, like a chair, your body remains calm. There is no surge of chemistry, no tightening. The image is neutral. It appears and disappears without effort. Now picture the memory that keeps returning. Notice how different it feels. The difference is emotion. Emotion is energy in motion. When you repeatedly combine the same image with the same emotional surge, the brain links them tightly. The image becomes a trigger. The trigger produces the surge. The surge reinforces the image. Over time, the thought feels magnetic. To loosen this magnetism, You do not need to erase the memory, you need to reduce the charge. When the image arises, instead of entering the storyline, experiment with changing its sensory qualities. See it in black and white, rather than color. Push it slightly farther away in your mind's eye. Lower the imagined volume of voices. Slow down the movement of the scene. This is not denial, it is altering the way your brain encodes the image in the present moment. The nervous system responds to sensory cues. A loud, close, vivid image triggers stronger activation. A distant, muted image triggers less. By adjusting the mental settings, you reduce the emotional intensity. The body does not react as strongly. Without the full chemical surge, the thought loses part of its gravity. You may feel resistance at first. The mind might say, "But this was serious. I can't just dim it." That reaction shows how tightly identity has fused with the emotional charge. It feels like you are dishonoring your own experience. You are not. You are reclaiming control over how it lives inside you now. Stay with the adjusted image for a few breaths. Notice the body. Is the chest slightly softer? Is the jaw less tight? Even a small shift matters. The goal is not to feel joy immediately. The goal is to reduce the intensity from overwhelming to manageable. When emotion decreases, clarity increases. Without heavy charge, the problem begins to look less like a monolith and more like a situation with components. You can see nuances. You can recognize your part without drowning in shame. You can see the other person's limitations without collapsing into anger. This is what dematerialization really means. The problem stops feeling like an immovable object and starts feeling like information. Information can be worked with. It can be analyzed. It can be responded to calmly. Emotion is what keeps it locked in place. Think about how a storm looks from inside versus from above. Inside the storm, wind and rain feel chaotic and threatening. From above, you see patterns, movement, space. The storm is still real, but perspective changes your relationship to it. When you lower the emotional volume of a memory, you rise slightly above it. You are no longer inside the full force of it. You are observing its structure. Over time, if you consistently reduce the charge, the brain begins to reclassify the memory. It moves from current threat to past event. The nervous system no longer reacts as if something urgent is happening. The image may still appear, but it floats rather than pulls. Without strong emotion, the thought cannot anchor itself in your body. It drifts in and out more easily. This is where many people experience an unexpected feeling, lightness. Not because the past disappeared, but because it no longer occupies so much internal space. Energy that was trapped in maintaining the emotional reaction becomes available, and that availability is important. When a recurring problem loses its density, it creates space in your attention. You are no longer spending hours replaying the same internal scene. The mental field becomes quieter, more open. Nature does not tolerate empty space for long. When something loses its hold, something else moves in. The question becomes, what will fill that space? Old patterns will try to return. Familiar thoughts may attempt to reclaim territory. But if the emotional charge has truly weakened, you now have room to choose what replaces it. And that choice begins shaping something much larger than the memory itself. When a recurring memory loses its emotional charge, something subtle but powerful happens. The space it once occupied does not remain empty, it becomes available. And what you do with that availability begins to shape your direction. For years, a large portion of your mental energy may have been invested in maintaining the same internal pattern, replaying conversations, anticipating disappointment, defending against imagined threats. That repetition consumed attention, chemistry, and time. When the loop weakens, you recover that energy. Energy is creative. It does not sit still. If you no longer wake up immediately revisiting the same regret, your first thoughts of the day begin to change. If your body is not flooded with the usual stress signal, your perception shifts. You notice options that previously felt invisible. You respond rather than react. These seem like small differences, but they accumulate. Destiny is not a dramatic event waiting for you in the future. It is the direction created by repeated states and decisions. When your internal state changes consistently, even slightly, the decisions that follow begin to differ. You might speak with more steadiness in a difficult conversation. You might take a calculated risk you would have avoided before. You might allow yourself to trust a little more. Each of these actions nudges your trajectory. Think of it like adjusting the angle of a plane by just a few degrees. At first, the shift seems insignificant, but over hundreds of miles, the destination changes completely. In the same way, when your baseline emotional state becomes calmer and more coherent, your long-term outcomes begin to diverge from the old pattern. This is the new configuration. It does not require grand declarations. It requires consistency. When your nervous system is no longer anchored to the past, it becomes responsive to the present. And the present is where choice lives. You start asking different questions. Instead of, "Why does this always happen to me?" you begin to ask, "What is possible from here?" That shift in inquiry activates different neural networks. The brain moves from defense to exploration. Creativity increases. Solutions emerge more easily because your system is not preoccupied with threat. There is also a deeper biological effect. When stress hormones decrease and moments of calm increase, your body repairs more efficiently. Sleep improves. Focus sharpens. Emotional regulation strengthens. These changes influence how you show up in every area of life. Health, relationships, work, all respond to your internal coherence. Coherence is alignment between thought, emotion, and action. When you think about a goal and your body does not contract in doubt, that alignment produces momentum. You are no longer forcing yourself forward while internally resisting. Movement becomes smoother, and as this coherence stabilizes, your expectations adjust. You no longer predict the same old outcome automatically. You allow room for something different. That openness changes how you interpret events. A setback becomes feedback instead of proof of failure. A delay becomes strategy instead of rejection. Over time, others respond to this new energy. Your tone is steadier. Your presence is less reactive. Conversations feel different. Opportunities that once felt intimidating feel manageable. The world has not transformed overnight, but your interaction with it has. This is how destiny shifts quietly. It is not mystical. It is cumulative. State influences perception. Perception influences choice. Choice influences outcome. Outcome reinforces state. When the original state changes, the entire chain reorganizes. You may still encounter challenges. Life does not become free of difficulty, but your relationship to difficulty evolves. You are not pulled backward into old emotional loops as easily. You remain present longer. You recover faster. That resilience alone alters your trajectory. Imagine having access to the energy that was previously locked inside repetitive thought. Imagine directing that energy toward building something instead of defending against something, toward learning instead of reliving, toward creating instead of replaying. The question shifts from, "Why does my mind keep returning there?" to "What can I build with the attention I have regained?" When the map of pain is no longer guiding every step, you are free to draw a different route. And the route you draw today, through small aligned actions, becomes the landscape you walk in tomorrow. Your mind kept returning there because you trained it to. Not out of weakness, but out of repetition. Thought became chemistry. Chemistry became identity. And identity began shaping your future without asking your permission. Today you saw something different. The memory is not a prison. It is a pattern. And patterns can be interrupted. When you observe instead of react, when you lower the emotional charge, when you reclaim your attention, you stop recycling the past and start redirecting energy. This is your contract with yourself. No more unconscious repetition. From now on, when a familiar thought appears, ask quietly, "Is this building my future or rebuilding my past?" If you made it all the way here, write in the comments, "I choose a new pattern." That's how I'll know you stayed with me. And if this spoke to you, watch one of the videos on your screen now. Keep training your mind in a new direction.